This is An Infinite Path, spoken word essays by Niles Heckman, some of which go on to become our documentary short subject films, half of which release freely here through the podcast, all of which can be found through your support at nilesheckman.com. Every woman man has two educations. One they're taught by others, and the other they teach themselves. Sadly, most folks don't teach themselves that much. They go through the structured schooling system and then stop at some point, and that's the end of their learning once they slot into a role in their soul-crushing desk slave job. So they end up not knowing that much about the wonders and the magic of the world, but instead their role in a tiny sliver of commerce. Even if one has a PhD, they may not be educated, because schooling is vocational instruction for employment via hive mind, groupthink, and established way of doing things, while a real education is a real authentic life of practical and truthful knowledge learned. Hence, education and schooling are two different things. School is solely for employment, and real-life education is about the ascendant course of life betterment and discovery. If an elder teaches you a practical trade, making things of value with your hands, for example, that's education. If an authority figure schools you in a mainstream version of American history, that's schooling. If an elder teaches you how to be responsible with your finances and what they used to call balancing your checkbook and what they more amply call wealth management today, that's education. If an authority figure schools you in a short-term memorization in whatever subject to pass a rubbish test which you'll then later forget all the answers to about a week later, that's schooling. If an elder teaches you how to catch a fish or ride a horse, that's education. If an authority figure schools you in sitting at a desk with some other robots in training, and the more you conform, the more stars you get up on the board, that's schooling. If one with more experience than you gives you some insights on the esoteric and occult inner mysteries of the mind and how to practically use them, that's a real education. Even though there are some great teachers out there who deserve praise, recognition, acknowledgement, and salaries, of course, 10 times more than what they are, most schooling in modernity is rubbish. If you're going through metal detectors and fearing for your well-being every day, that's tragic and adds to a destructive path, breeding an environment where you end up in a minimum wage slave job, or barely able to read, or headed towards a life of crime, or destined for prison. However, even if you're in an affluent school district, it's still latent path paint by numbers handed down from the boards of education of the day. So, many insightful young people are bored out of their minds in school because unless you have a very special teacher who transforms the material into something tangible, relevant, and practical, it's dreadfully bland. And that's with decent budgets into the arts and extracurriculars, let alone starving budgets. And to throw a wrench into the mainstream reality tunnel gears, one could say that this has been intentional because fascism, communism, and corporate consumer capitalism don't need intelligent, free-thinking, lucid, conscious, powerful individuals who are truly educated. They need obedient wage slave consumers who have been schooled only to a certain level. In the old one-room schoolhouse days of the 1700s and 1800s, they would teach children the 7 liberal arts, beginning with grammar, logic, and rhetoric. Grammar, of course, being what you hear or what you read, logic being how you truly interpret that for yourself, and rhetoric being how you properly communicate it to others. More on that in a future essay, but the beauty of that system, which if followed, is that it would build a foundation to allow the child critical thinking, to then give them a tool set to be able to continue teaching themselves. Give someone a fish is a single gift versus teaching them how to fish is a gift for a lifetime. So there can be a beauty in something like homeschools if your parent does it out of a conscious knowing of some of these things briefly mentioned, and not because they're a theocrat or some other form of dogmatist. More personal one-on-one schooling methods allow the new fresh mind of an inquisitive little person room if given a healthy balance of extracurricular activities, which allow for a social life, so you are actually getting an education mixed with some amount of schooling. The process of unschooling is a beautiful example of this, which is essentially allowing a child to learn practically, out in the world, not in a classroom, what they want to learn at their own pace. For the mind to develop and unfold on its own terms instead of standardized testing terms. This is how it had always been in human history prior to education boards in the United States, for example, mandating that children be required to attend school at the behest of their hard land-working parents. Some of you out there may know various excellent folks who have gotten back to basics by homeschooling or unschooling their children today with a proper balance of being non-nutters themselves, and as a result, their children are much more vibrant and alive because they've gotten a mixture of enjoyable unschooling with practical real-world education, so they are motivated, strong readers, studied in the arts, sciences, mathematics, physics, chemistry, etc. But of course, it requires the parents to be truly educated themselves to do this, which, surprise, surprise, they most likely are not. Combined with the need for ample amounts of free time, which, surprise, surprise, they likely themselves do not have. If you are today an adult and eager to learn compelling and insightful material, but didn't really like high school, you already consciously, unconsciously, or subconsciously know all these things. Mark Twain understood this as well and once said, "I never let my schooling interfere with my education," because he was an educated man who could see through the distractions and illusions of the machine that sends young minds into its gears and turns out square head hat-holding minds inside boxes thinking that their trainers have been responsible, solely teaching them to perfect activities and master routines, which is exactly what the future soul-draining departmentalized workforce will offer. So the best educators out there will know, deep down, what they are working with within the structured system, which has some advantages, but is inherently limiting, and they could do their best work outside of that system completely. So rather than teaching music class at the fancy prep school, under their imposed restrictions, one might be better off starting their own small business after-school music program. It's the same story as the true journalist who comes to realize they must do their best journalistic work on their own personal blog than at their corporate job, which is only interested in selling infotainment and actually has no interest in real journalism. Or the same story as the Hollywood production artist who must make his best work on occult films completely independently. These paths show that self-education leads to practical experiences where you have been responsible for your own actions, imposed your own disciplines, become well-rounded for many outcomes, and learned to critically think. That thinking is the dangerous part. Those who truly think outside the box those square graduation hats symbolize, which their parents are so happily celebrating their indoctrination into. But like all things in life which require proper exposure of the aperture, of, let's say, to use a lens metaphor, f5.6, we can find that having a certain amount of schooling combined with a certain amount of true education lets the future possibilities of the life flower open the most, where the young adult then has the option to have a good to excellent wage within the artificiality of commerce, while also being able to grow as an independent and unique individual, who does not outsource their thinking to others, but only form their personal conclusions based on their own inner and outer experiences. Because those Jedi are not good at screwing winkets onto wonkets in the assembly lines, and instead want more from life, they are hard to control and dissolvers of the black iron prison of big religion, big corporations, big government, and big science empire. And this is not even getting into the public versus private debate of social class, let alone the grossness of student debt caused by getting a formal higher schooling, thus making you more susceptible to needing to go work for the big man to pay off your debts rather than pursue a more creative life path, which may not be as financially stable, but is ultimately much more fulfilling. A real education doesn't need to cost anything more than your time, your travel, and your ability to access the good aspects of the internet, the modern-day library card. But best yet, wise elders who have a lineage of wisdom which is passed down from those who are in search of the mystery and want to have their lives have meant something through their services and compassion to others' growth, not just their own. Through our education, we come to learn that life is much more about let thy will be done over let my will be done. Oh, to live in a world which truly educated its youth in order to find their true will over figuring out solely what they want to do to make money. A system much more in service to natural and spiritual law of how the system actually really operates, which allows the occult phrase, do what thy will shall be the whole of the law, love is the law, love under will, to have a bit more meaning perhaps. As Jedis who study the occult come to realize, you never rob the student of their own self-discovery. As some of the most influential individuals in the world, in their fields, learned way more from their personal passion-filled self-studies than any of their formal schooling to whatever hierarchical level. Some of the most incredible powerful Jedi I have ever met do not have strong resumes showing off their outer superficial compartmentalized qualifications. They have achieved mastery first for themselves, which has then outwardly manifested in their unique works, which will almost always fly the flag of independence. The highly schooled person who got multiple PhDs ends up with a high-rise office, some nice toys, a good golf swing, and perhaps made a few rich people richer, but is ultimately totally replaceable. The autodidact ends their days with much more knowledge and works that reflected their originality and creativity, which, however small or large, left some level of memorable legacy.